Welcome to the Art and Science of Complex Sales, proudly presented by Membrane. This podcast is your gateway to mastering the craft of modern selling. If you're passionate about growth, impact, and unlocking your full potential in sales and revenue, you're in the right place. So don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. And now let's get started with today's guest. So we know this, but it's hard to put into practice. Aligning the internal sales organization with a buyer is more important than ever. And sales teams can't operate in informational silos. All areas of the sales team have to be empowered to move deals forward. So we're talking through this today with Art Fromm. Art is CEO and founder of Team Sales Development. He's also author of a recent book, Making Seamless Sales. And this is Art's opus dedicated to driving organizational excellence in team selling. So we're diving into some elements of the buying and selling process in complex deals, and we're making the case for driving a shared framework that is enabling team sales and ultimately driving amazing customer relationships. So let's get started with Art Fromm. Hey, Art, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Paul. Thanks for having me, and welcome everybody that's listening or watching.
Yeah, no, we've been trying to get this on the calendar for a while now, it seems, but we're finally recording, so I'm pumped about it. Hey, what part of the world you are for the listeners?
So I'm from Mars, believe it or not.
Mars,
literally Mars, Pennsylvania. So I'm a man from Mars. It's north of Pittsburgh.
Nice. That's different than Hershey, Pennsylvania, right? Hershey makes the chocolate. Mars is a different part of the company.
There you go. Yeah, that's an interesting point. I don't know if there's a connection to that. I'll have to figure that out.
I got
Very good insight. I am a chocolate lover, so I could appreciate that.
Well, M&Ms. I would much rather have an M&M personally than a Hershey bar.
It's
got the thin candy shell.
It's another go-to.
Yeah, thin candy shell. Well, hey, I appreciate you being on here. We have a bunch to deal with, and your specific expertise is really around how we're tying together different parts of the sales organization, sales, pre-sales, everywhere to really ensure that we're not operating in silos. So we're going to dive there in a little bit. But first off, you're going to have to tell me a little bit about your background. How'd you get into sales?
I started as a mechanical engineer, believe it or not, and I was this is in the early 80s, where CAD and computer-aided technology and computer-aided engineer analysis and all that was just starting. And I had the opportunity to get involved with that at a company that I was at. So I moved from engineering after a few years into that, started with basic process and instrumentation diagrams and all that. And then that led to such a love for it that I wanted to be involved with the applications. So I did internal applications, like an IT type role specific to CAD and all that inside of my company. I did that for three companies actually. And then one of the software companies we were working with recruited me. So that's when my career changed to sales. So I was a customer of technology. Then I went into sales, initially in essentially a sales engineer type role. It was really application engineers, what they called it back in the day, working with the salesperson with the big, huge, desktop boxes and all that stuff. But I did that. I was also in sales, and then I was in sales management, led pre-sales and sales teams. And then around the year 2000, 26 years ago, can't even believe it, because of things I was doing with my team at the time, which at that time was a pre-sales team that I was managing, they were getting a lot of product training from the company, but not much in terms of consultative selling. And with my 8 years of sales background and being a prior customer, I wanted to do things for them that the company wasn't providing. So they said, hey, why don't you give it a try? We'll see how it goes. And our region, our area was far and above better than the other ones. It was clear the benefits of it. So they put me into sales enablement. So I moved in, 26 years ago inside of a company into sales enablement, was doing that globally for them. And then 2004, went on my own. I also eventually, a year later, joined with a global learning company. And after that, since 2009, I've been on my own Team Sales Development's the name of the company, and I help sales and pre-sales work together seamlessly to grow revenue, margins, win rate, and client satisfaction. So quite a varied, as a customer in sales and
Mhm.
sales management, and then sales and sales and pre-sales and enablement.
Well, let's talk. We need to get some definitions down. But before we go into that, what are some of your biggest learnings? Just if you don't mind, just some of your biggest learnings from your time, transitioning from being that engineer. I'm always fascinated by this, being that engineer and then diving into sales and sales leadership. Like,
Mhm.
what are some of the biggest learnings that you took from that?
Well, and this comes true in life in general, is that having the engineering background, it's about problem solving, it's about curiosity, it's about root cause analysis
Mhm.
and trying to come up with a pragmatic answer. So yeah, you can get analysis paralysis, which is kind of dangerous. But the point is, having that natural curiosity and wanting to solve problems worked out perfectly in sales, because once you're focused on the client and what they are trying to do and helping them solve their problems, that becomes a real exciting engagement. It allows me to take whatever I might have to offer and then engineer a solution, and we're even engineering the sale for that matter, to be a win-win outcome for both of us. So that's one part that's been a real benefit, especially now with my sales enablement. Same thing with my
Mhm.
clients. What are they really trying to do? And it's not about what I have, it's about what they're trying to solve. So that has been a big carryover that's worked well in my personal and business life.
Well, so let's talk about how you're driving that too, then into these silos that you see. And first, before that, let's define those terms for us so we're all on the same page before diving in.
Mhm. Yes, thanks for that clarification, because I've found that there is a big variation in different parts of, different people that are doing different things. Pre-sales that I'm talking about is the sales engineer, solution architect, solution consultant type role that knows the technology really, really deeply and is engaged with the salesperson
Mhm.
to traditionally, which we'll get into this, but traditionally would be the person doing the demo, doing the proof of concept, those types of things, because the salesperson just doesn't have the expertise. And then sales generically is going to be more of the business type sales. So the relationships with perhaps the higher level decision makers, which again, that's kind of traditionally the way it's been.
Yeah.
The ones that are driving the value proposition and doing the T's and C's and making sure that the deal is done. So ironically enough, pre-sales is already is engaged later in the sales process. So what happens usually is a lead comes in for marketing or cold calling or
Mhm.
whatever, SDR or BDR, a sales development rep or business development rep is involved at the beginning. They do some initial analysis, and then if it looks like there's good alignment, they will get a sales person involved, either a account executive or account manager, and then they are usually the ones that are bringing in the pre-sales resource, so the sales engineer type third person. And so really everybody's pre-sales until it's a sale.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
specifically the in the worlds that I'm working in consultative selling and B2B selling, usually pre-sales is that sales engineer type role, and then they're all
Okay.
driving toward getting the client on board. And therefore what we'll dig into a little bit is why that has been problematic and why it still is to this day. And I'm trying to break down some of these names and just focus on what the functions are, what the purposes are.
And then sales enablement, as I understand it, as you look at it, is really something that goes across all of those levels. Like it's just what ties together all of the team and how we then function as a unit. And am I right there?
Yes, in some companies, it's the enabling with training, and that includes product and methodology training
Mhm.
for anybody that's a client-facing individual. So now we're even branching over into, client success, which traditionally was an over-the-wall type thing. After the sale, it's like, okay, make sure the client's successful. So we're talking a lot about the way it has been. In
Mhm.
some companies, sales enablement includes marketing and enabling the sales organization with marketing type materials and those types of things. For me, it's more of the methodology, the mindset, the frameworks that allow sales and pre-sales to execute, and then client success to be involved earlier, so that we've got that continuous seamless engagement with the buyer. And the whole point is
Perfect.
that it should be all about buyer enablement. Really, that's what it's about.
Perfect. Okay. And thanks for doing that going through those things. And listeners, I know some of you may be like, when you're, and Art is just stating the obvious, but the really interesting thing I found in doing a lot of these episodes is those definitions really matter. Areas of the country are different. Areas of expertise are different. Different experts call things different companies call things different things. And so gaining that agreement on what we're talking about is really, really important. And so you have found that there is this idea of, and you've actually written a whole book on it that's been and helpful to a lot of people. Yeah, making seamless sales, and highly recommend everybody pick up a copy. And but let's talk about this concept that you talk about in making seamless sales, about removing the barriers and ensuring that we have fewer silos and more impact across an organization for our customers.
Mm-hmm. Yes, again, traditionally, and this is what I grew up in the world of, there you needed to have somebody that was really highly technical and didn't necessarily do much of the business sales part of it. That was the salesperson's job. And they would just sort of wheel in the technical resource and wheel them back out again. And there's a lot of jokes and memes about, the salesperson going to the back of the room and eating their donuts while the pre-sales person is doing the demo. And then the pre-sales person, is gone and the salesperson comes back in. And that's clearly, we've all made a lot of progress in that area. However, organizationally, and even the functions of those roles still wind up being quite separate. So for example, very simply, and everybody can think about this in your own organization, where does the sales engineer organization, and I'm talking about B2B complex sales, so supply chain, IT, telecommunications, software, security, that type of stuff, where you need a technical person to help with, the technology. That where does the pre-sales sales engineer organization and the sales organization come together? In a lot of companies, especially in the United States, and this is a little different in Europe, is that, and in Asia, is that it's quite a high level, like a operations person, like a sales operations, or even an SVP of sales may then have a branch that's down to the sales engineering level. But when it comes to the way that the work is being done, it's not necessarily well aligned. So what happens is that we've got sales that might still be thinking of pre-sales as a resource, and pre-sales wanting to be more involved and not being able to because they're still sort of put in their corner a little bit. What we're trying to do is break that down, because the reality is now the buyers are much more educated, and the pre-sales people have to know more about what the business needs are as well. And in the book, I talk about a triangle. If you look at the organization as a pyramid, right? And you got the CX level, and this is the client, the buyer. Mm-hmm. You got the CXO level, you got middle management, and you have the end users. Traditionally, pre-sales would be at the bottom of that pyramid, talking to them and influencing them with the technology and the features and functions. And then at the top should be the salesperson influencing them about the business justification and all that. Well, now those need to be much more blended. Pre-sales needs to stretch up higher, and sales needs to stretch down a little bit lower, not to the level of executing the technology, but understanding why the technology matters. It's that healthy overlap in the middle that I'm really trying to focus on. But a lot of things conspire against it. The organizational structures, even training organizations, most training companies, sales enablement companies, they only focus on either pre-sales or sales. Nobody's really doing it together because it's hard. It's very hard. So I've got certain things laid out about the way that pre-sales and sales works together, and it all focuses on the buyer enablement journey and the way that they can work together to help that happen.
So how are you seeing companies change? I mean, it is a traditional structure, right? At least
Hmm.
at in large companies that have a lot of these pre-sales sales engineer resources and that type of stuff. How are you seeing companies start to change, or what are you recommending companies start to change in terms of that structure to get more alignment and get out of silos?
Yeah. So the biggest thing is that at an individual contributor level, we don't look at it as, two separate roles in two different departments. There still may be management um, things that are different for a salesperson versus a pre-salesperson in terms of compensation and other things like that. Even a little bit of the way that they're wired. When it comes to execution, it's about the way that we're working together, regardless of the way that the organization is formed. And starting with the idea that pre-sales or sales engineers should be responsible for the technical part of the sale, not just a demo, but literally getting the technical buy-in of the right decision makers, which can go very high up that pyramid, and sales working together with them to do the business close. So at a fundamental operation level and what functions being performed, there may or may not be demos involved. There might be meetings, there might be all kinds of different things where the sales engineer is much better suited. Case in point, if you were to ask a client, who do they trust more? Which one do you think inherently they're going to say that they trust more, the pre-sales or the salesperson?
Yeah, that SE. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. And it's because they know that they really do know their stuff and all that. And so the salesperson starting to look at the SE as just another member of the sales team and not just somebody that they wheel in and wheel out when it's appropriate, that can help with that idea of seamless. It allows, I like to say that the SE is kind of like the bartender or the hairdresser. The client will tell an SE almost anything. And I've experienced that before. I was in a SE type role. And then I got the opportunity to also become the salesperson. And literally, Paul, the day after I announced that, the Monday after I was changed to that additional role, the client stopped believing like 1/3 of what I said because they're like, "You're in sales now," and I'm like, "No, I'm still the same person that was here on Friday." So sales should be utilizing the sales engineers appropriately earlier in the sales cycle. What's interesting as well is that oftentimes sales doesn't trust pre-sales. So the client trusts sales engineers, but the salesperson doesn't necessarily trust them. And I think it's goes back to the engineering aspect. Like they're going to say the wrong thing. They're going to say we can't do this. They're going to be too truthful about it or whatever. Well, that's an inside conversation that should be happening. Inside between sales and pre-sales, that's a great thing to have a discussion about is what's the practicality of this. And we don't want to get caught up in analysis paralysis where pre-sales is just digging their heels in and they're known as the land of no, where it's like, no, I'm
Mm-hmm.
not going to do that. It's more of the curiosity of what are we really trying to do? What are they trying to do? And I think the sales cycles can be expedited. A deal, win rates and things can go up. It'll be more obvious which deals not to chase, which I know all the salespeople listening to this are like, I need to chase after everything. But do you? And is that healthy? Do you
Mm-hmm.
really want a funnel where stuff falls out way late in the process? Or would you rather eliminate that because there's not alignment up front? So those are some of the fundamental changes, Paul. It's in the framework and the mindset and the way that they're working together, even if it's still two different organizations.
Do you recommend? And I love where you're thinking of this because some of my history, working with SEs and selling bigger deals, uh, I always tried to, I had to sell well to develop that one-on-one relationship with the SE that I was working with, and it was horrible when I would just in an organization where I would just lob over a demo, right? Where it was
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, here, just get the demo and ask the questions and all that stuff. But there was a lot of organizations that were structured that way. That it was like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
hey, we have an SE pool and, put in your requirements and lob it over to the SE, and the SE can come in and they can give a demo and they can give some feedback on the structural stuff. And um, but they would ignore that relationship between myself as a salesperson and the sales engineer, right? They would ignore, like, in terms of picking, I didn't have a choice of who I got to do a demo. Um, do you recommend, like, you have teams, like pairing teams and that tightness of, because that's taking out a lot of those barriers is really helpful and effective for driving
Mhm.
trust and working together in a sale.
When it can be done, yes. In some organizations, it can't be done. So now it gets to what's the common framework and what's the common language. So even when
Mhm.
you do bring a resource in and it's for a specific purpose, there's still the idea of what are we doing here? What have we done with technical close? And that's very specific. It's more than a technical win. So it's not just show the demo and let them see that they like it. It's the purpose of moving the deal forward. It's about
Mhm.
getting the buy-in that they will go forward with your solution at the exclusion of the alternatives. So there's a framework of understanding of what everybody's doing. It's like any well-oiled team. And I know here in the US, the easy comparison with the Super Bowl coming up, whenever this airs, it would have maybe happened already. But the quarterback has a certain job, and so do all the other players, like with many teams. But when they execute a certain play, everybody knows what their part is, and you can have interchangeable parts who still accomplish the goal. And what I think is missing is you're absolutely right, Paul. You and other sales reps that I've worked with who are successful figured out that it's because of that deeper relationship and being more of on the same mindset that it works. But it's not typically institutionalized. It's not
Mhm.
something where Medic or MedPick or BANT way back in the day, or whatever you want to call the sales methodology, was seeming to do some of that, but it's not a panacea, and it's probably made it worse. It's more about the fundamentals, like how do we determine value? How do we analyze the decision making process, which is so much more important than even the solution? We can have a perfect solution and not know who the decision makers are, and it doesn't matter. We don't want to throw stuff against the wall, whether it's a demo or whether it's the way we're trying to execute the engagement. So
Mhm.
it's those type of fundamentals that I've experienced in my 26 years of enablement and 10 years of sales, and that I've bottled up into this idea of making seamless sales, where the SE and the AM, and that's what this is, the play on words, is the SE and the AM, so sales engineer and account manager, working together seamlessly. And then at a meta level, Paul, is the idea of solution enablement, which is really what everybody needs to be focused on. It's solution
Mhm.
enablement for the client, and then account management, managing that client as a long-term account, not just a one-time do the sale and move on to the next client. So there's a lot of other implications for client success and things as well. But it's that framework, it's that understanding where you can rotate in and out, and everybody understands it's not a instantaneous tactical thing. There's a strategy behind it.
Well, let's start to dive into some of those core parts of that framework, if you don't mind, and that you see missing from organizations, but are necessary in organizations. So, do you mind just diving in
Yeah.
and sharing a little bit about that?
Sure. So one of it is, when I was writing the book and I really was focusing on pre-sales and sales working together, I realized, and I actually extended my revisions by 16 weeks, which cost me additional money to do it. But I spent 16 more weeks exploring the level above that. So we really
Mhm.
need to, instead of focusing just on that, let's find out the context that all this is working in. And the main context is it's got to be all about the buyer. And again, many people are listening is like, duh, it's got to be about the buyer. Well, I do an experiment when I do my one workshop. It's an introductory workshop for sales when I have the very first in a bunch of workshops. And I go through the sales process and we talk about that. And then we talk about the buying process and what the buyer's going through. And then I ask a simple question. I say to and this is for mainly sales people in this case, but it can
Mhm.
be for both. I say, what stage do you usually get involved with the most? Do you find your time, or where do you enter the process? And I don't say purposely, I don't say, oh, which process. I just say what stage. And everybody starts answering, oh, it's in qualification, it's in solution creation, it's in negotiation. And 98.5% of the time, Paul, what everybody answers is on the sales process stages. Almost nobody answers on the buyer process stages. So that's one mind shift right away is it doesn't really matter what we are trying to go through. And yeah, that's what management drives us through. That's what CRM is measuring. That's what a lot of methodologies are trying to help us with, from qualification all the way through. But what really matters, where's the buyer? And the whole point, the takeaway for everybody on this one is move left in the buying process as much as you can. So we've all had the situation where we have RFPs or RFQs, request for proposal or whatever show up. And we tend to take it from that point and run with it. Like, how can we put our best foot forward and answer this RFP so we can win it? The reality is that RFP didn't just come out of the blue. Something happened prior to that in the buyer's process that caused that RFP to happen. And I'm not advocating that we should always do RFP business. That's a whole nother discussion, because usually if you get an RFP, you've already lost the deal. But I'm using it to illustrate the point that we tend, wherever we get engaged, to think to the close. We want to get to the close. We have to think backwards. Who is involved? Why are they doing this? What are the goals that they have in mind? What if they don't do it? And all those things can influence that. So let me pause there. That's one meta level thing, is about really focusing on the buyer. And I have a flywheel concept in the book about it rotates around the buyer's stages and the process. But let me just pause there and see if you wanted to clarify or dig into anything else on that.
No, I mean, it's one of the fundamental issues that you find in a lot of sales organizations is that and Membrane is about process, right? That's one of the core elements of what we do, is how do we outline effective collaboration processes and sales processes, right? That's our platform. But one of the fundamental things is you find that disconnect and misunderstanding of where a buyer actually is and a buyer team actually is, and where a salesperson thinks they need to bring things, right?
Yeah.
And I can see how does that then impact then if we're trying to move to the left or trying to get a greater understanding, how does that impact the collaboration then between an SE and to the heart of your book, the SE and the AM, where it's got to impact where you bring them in, how you bring them in, how you educate them? Like, does your framework deal with that as well?
Absolutely. So studies show from a variety of different companies have done studies, and it hasn't been improving even the last 4 or 5 years with more focus on this just in general, is that SEs continue to get unqualified deals that they're trying to show a demo or participate in. So one of the ways that this should be working is that the qualification process shouldn't just be looked at as qualifying in or out of an opportunity. It definitely does that, but it's also discovery that's very, very valuable information to capture. And again, this is what Membrane does, is in terms of capturing a lot of this information so that it can flow through the whole process. In the book, I talk about the experience my wife and I had when we had our first child. And, my wife's water broke in the middle of the night. We went into the hospital, and, the first person asked us a bunch of questions. And then the next person asked us the same questions, and the next person asked us the same questions. We've all experienced that, right? And I know they're trying to get it right because it's about saving lives. However, in this case, why aren't we simply capturing information right from hello? And that could be automated systems, by the way, automated systems that the buyer has been interacting with, whether it's some automated demos or some kind of surveys or even the website, and start to capture that so that when a pre-sales resource is engaged, they have that full body of information to start with. And that's where, systems and processes need to be put in place. It also helps the salesperson when they're capturing it to realize it's not just about a point answer or a decision at that point in time. It's something that should live all the way through, frankly, to implementation. Because whatever we found out about who cared about it and why they did it, that comes back up again at the end when they're implementing, because they're not implementing it for their health, they're implementing it for outcomes. And those outcomes should be measured also. So that's why, even the buyer process, most sales processes that I saw when I did my research are linear. Some of them showed a circle, but generally speaking, the circle was just touch base back in with your customer, or call them 90 days before renewal, that type of thing. What I found interesting is almost no buyer process is ever represented as a circle, but it is a circle, and it should be a circle. When we say hello, when we first meet them, we should think of them as a customer for life, a client for life, and getting the renewals, getting the referrals, getting the consumption, expanding the opportunity, having them come to us left in the buying process, right? When they start to think of a new idea, how about if they reach out to Membrane and say, hey, we're thinking about doing this. Can you help us with this aspect of it? Now you know that you're in. So it's literally a flywheel effect that, with driven by the buyer, both of us are going around. And that's key to know at the beginning. So I like to say from hello, whatever that hello is, and then all the way through. That's where I see that coming into play. And that flavors everything in terms of who's involved and what they know and how they can expand on that information and share it with each other all the way through to client success.
So, like, what are the biggest problems that you find? Is it how organizations are structured? Is it how the information is put into CRM? Is it because people aren't accountable to each other? Like, what are the what are the problems?
It is that there's so much focus on trying to just chase after deals and things like that. There's so much focus on, and again, I am a salesperson right now, and I was a salesperson selling software solutions as well. We tend as a salesperson to want to run after everything, but the reality is it's not healthy. It's not good to try to run after everything. So a proper qualification process would help at the very top to narrow down the funnel at the very top so that you eliminate things that aren't a good fit. I think it was Macy's, right back in the day. If a customer came to them and they were looking for a product that wasn't quite right, they wouldn't just try to sell them something close. They go, hey, go across the street to the other store. And that does a couple things. One is it builds customer trust. Secondly, it eliminates you from setting yourself up for failure. And the third thing that happens is that, frankly, if it's not a good fit, I've had situations with some, especially supply chain companies, they could take the deal on, but it would be terrible margins. They'd have to stretch themselves so thin. Why don't you give that deal to a competitor and let the competitor run with it and struggle with it? And you can move on to things that are more in your swim lane. So taking that funnel and making it more into a pipeline is a key part. So it's execution of qualification. It's execution of the methodology. Again, this is where, Membrane comes in terms of implementing that, coaching on that. And then it's also, Paul, switching all the way to the end, because we always want to start with the end in mind. The end used to be closing the deal. And notice I said used to be, because a lot of people still think I'm trying to close the deal. I don't think that's true anymore with SaaS in particular. What I maintain, and what I mean by closing the deals, we used to be able to sell, software on a DVD. You literally, you deliver the DVD, you took the revenue and you counted that and you moved on to your next customer. Now with SaaS, it's about consumption. It's about, are they going to renew and things like that. So I've changed the idea of closing the deal to commitment to consume. What we're doing in all these motions is getting a commitment from the buyer to consume this solution. Therefore, we have to think past the quote unquote sale, and client success has to be brought in earlier. And this is another, you asked what can be done to make it better. Bring client success in potentially as that higher level account manager toward the goal of them eventually owning this customer. And they wouldn't be involved with necessarily selling per se, but they can help with the sanity of fulfilling the value that's expected. And then there's no handover. There's no throw it over the wall. It's like a handshake. It's a smooth, seamless process where that person just continues to move through. The big four accounting firms do that, right? They have the person that's going to run with you the whole way through the process. And I was in a role like that too, and it worked great. You get that continual involvement. So those are two main things I would say is better discipline up front with how the whole thing starts, because it's like garbage in, garbage out. So start with really, really good qualification and capturing that. And then knowing that it's not just a close we're going for, it's the commitment to consume. And only when they consume does a lot of companies get paid.
But it's got to be, and on that qualification is massive, because you do need the qualification from and the go ahead from all parts of the organization. I mean, not just from the customer. You do need to understand the qualification, what the customer is bringing to the table, their team, and all of those things. But the qualification is much more than budget, need, and timing. Now, we
Sure.
have to understand technical fit. We have to understand those, cultural fit. We have to understand those type of things to really move things forward. And I get what you're saying. It used to be, okay, you got a salesperson that's like, oh man, they got budget. I see dollar signs. Let's run. Right. And it just doesn't work at this point. I've seen so many, and I look at the realm of ERPs
Mm-hmm.
to see just massive. I've seen massive failures as well as in CRM. I mean, I compete in the CRM realm. You see
Mm-hmm.
people that sell things that are so overblown, but on the back end you see massive failures. Incredible. They're not used. They have or they're if they are used, they're only used by IT, and they have no relevance to the sales team. And um, so gaining that alignment early on is
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't agree more. It's incredibly important, and
Yeah.
how
And I
you
think,
do that as a team internally is incredibly important.
yeah. And again, all knowing that that's the key things that you're trying to go for. So as soon as something doesn't seem right, no matter who it is that finds it, should be able to bring it up, have a discussion like, wait a second here. What are we really doing? And everybody should be open enough to have that discussion. And that's where I think some of the boundaries start to get into play, because maybe the sales engineer doesn't feel like they should speak up. And maybe the account manager is saying, I don't want to hear it because I need to close this deal. We got to have some of that transparency. But just real quick, 3 nuggets of what you just said that are really critical. And I highlight a methodology in the book called Sales Opportunity Snapshot. It's
Okay.
been in use. I have a client that's been using it for 21 years, believe it or not, very successfully, like increased win rate 58% to 74%. I mean, dramatic. Here's the thing, in that methodology, it takes all the other ones and goes the next step further. Number one, it doesn't ask, do they have budget? Because talk about moving left in the buying cycle. There are things that they don't know that they should
Mhm.
be actually doing, that if we help them with it and we help them get the budget or get the commitment, they would love that, right? A lot of times you're dealing with an IT organization that's strapped for resources, but if we can help them with a value proposition that allows them to go get budget, that's a win for everybody. So it's what we call it is, do they have the ability to fund or commit to the project? And that implies in their money and all the rest of that, and also who you're talking with. Second big nugget of what you just said was an analysis of ourselves. Do we have the ability to deliver? And this is something that salespeople hate to ask. You've been around long enough, and most people listening to this probably have. The old sales adage was, "Don't confuse sales and implementation," meaning just sell it and don't worry about it. Like, somebody else will implement it somehow. Well, you can't do that, especially with SaaS. If you get
Mhm.
close a deal, quote unquote, and it can't be executed, you're not going to get any revenue. The third aspect is the decision process and the decision makers. And this is the one where I feel like it's falling down the most. And again, it's a healthy overlap. Inside of that client organization, the technical people should be speaking to the business people, and we should have relationships to them all the way up and down that chain and across potentially into other departments. So without those three core things, which many of the methodologies fall short on, or they overgloss it with a simple term like economic buyer. In my mind, economic buyer is like 4 different types of things that could be there, including, do they have signing authority? That should be totally separate. Those 3 nuggets alone would be a great place to start and just investigate where you're at and is everybody on the same page.
Well, I love it, and thanks for your time here and your investment in elevating the sales profession. This is really good stuff. How do people find you if they want to chat with Art?
2 primary ways would be LinkedIn. So I'm Art Fromm, Fromm. And if you just do LinkedIn/in/Art Fromm, you'll find me there. Please connect there, send me a message or whatever. And then I highly recommend checking out the website, teamsalesdevelopment.com. I have a ton of assets and resources, other podcasts and things I've done, articles. I just posted, and you'll hear more about this, about an ebook where it lays out some of these main big chunks, and where you feel you're interested. I'd love to have a conversation with you to explore, what you're doing and what ideas there are that can help that. Because the goal is increase win rate, increase revenue, increase margins, and increase client satisfaction. Because if they're not satisfied, then most of us aren't making any money. That's what it's all about.
That's great stuff. And everybody, I do recommend go out and check out the book. So Making Seamless Sales, How Pre-Sales and Sales Can Work Together Seamlessly. So that's paperback, Kindle, and hardcover. It looks like we got all three options. So good stuff. And do you have an Audible yet?
Not yet. It's something that one of the things is, and just a side note, there's like 32 diagrams in the book. So there's all kinds of diagrams, and I collaborated with 3 of my partners as well. So they wrote forwards and allowed me to have some content in there, because I teach workshops from each of them in my portfolio, and I'm trying to share with everybody this big picture and all the things. It's like somebody called it a manifesto. I don't like that nomenclature. That sounds a little evil, but this is my, gift. This is like my compilation. This is my summary of everything that I've learned, and now in the modern selling, how it all really needs to come together and can start to change for the better.
It's your opus. It's Mr. Fromm's opus.
That draws back to a great movie. I love that movie.
All right. So do I. Love that. Love that movie. Well, thank you so much, Art. Thanks for coming on. Any final thoughts you want to give to the audience today?
I mean, let's just see what we could do one small increment at a time, whether it's you as an individual just working with your sales counterpart. The book can help you with that. The methodology can help. It doesn't have to be institutionalized. From the top down is always better, so that everybody's on the same page. But let's see what we could do individually and how I can help in any way that you like. I'd be glad to do that. Thanks so much.
Well, thanks for coming on. I appreciate it. Everybody, thank you for listening today. Please make sure you're doing all the fun stuff, the liking, the sharing, the clicking, the commenting, and all of that to help this content get out there. We do appreciate your listenership. And as always, keep shining bright, elevating the sales profession, and have an amazing, amazing day. We'll talk to you soon.